Funeral services were held day before yesterday. No, yesterday. What day is today? Wednesday? Yeah, day before yesterday. I take one day off, and I'm totally bombed on what day of the week it is. Anyhow, funeral services were held Monday in Detroit, in Hazel Park, a suburb of working-class suburb of Detroit, for a fellow by the name of John Skelly Jr. He's 69 years old. He died in Detroit because Consumers Power, which I remember Consumers Power. I used to buy electricity from Consumers Power when I lived in Michigan. They've been my electricity vendor on multiple occasions. As I recall, both in Lansing and Detroit. And I don't remember if they're for-profit or not-for-profit or, community-owned or not. But Consumers Power, because he owed them $760.28, he and his roommate, this guy, by the way, the 69-year-old man, John Skelly Jr., was a Vietnam War veteran. It was 2 degrees Fahrenheit out. Minus 19 Celsius, 2 degrees Fahrenheit, bitterly cold. They cut off his gas, his natural gas. They cut off his heat because he owed them $700. They cut it off on the day of a night that was 2 degrees, and he froze to death that night. Now, tell me there's not something essentially sick and twisted about a capitalist system that even has the ability to do that. This is the conservative world we live in, where when Ron Paul in a presidential debate 4 years ago, 6 years ago, whatever it was asked by, I think it was Wolf Blitzer in CNN, wasn't it? Was asked, okay, a 30-year-old guy, he's a young guy, he's healthy, he thinks he doesn't need health insurance, so he doesn't have it. And then he gets hit in a car accident, and he's laying there in the street dying. Don't we have an obligation to pick him up and take him into the hospital and pay for his, save his life? And somebody in the audience yells, "Let him die!" And then Ron Paul says essentially the same thing in a far more sophisticated fashion. This is the world that these conservatives live in. Here's another example, and I think this is a spectacular one. The state of Washington, this so illustrates how Republicans think, and Democrats for that matter. And I think this is like a really important, there's a morality tale here. And that is that in Washington state, when the good citizens of the state passed a state referendum, the decriminalization of marijuana, and the legalization of a legal recreational marijuana market in the state of Wisconsin, in the state of Washington, was not done by the legislature. And in fact, it to this day is apparently opposed by the governor, Jay Inslee. It was done instead by the people. People said, we get it. The politicians are too damn timid. They're never going to do the right thing. And they're taking money from, companies that don't want pot decriminalized. In those states, Washington State and Oregon, where pot has been, recreational pot has been legalized, what has happened? The number of people dying of narcotics overdoses has collapsed, or has dropped anyway, significantly. Pardon me, I got the hiccups and I'm not sure why. Number one, fewer people are overdosing from narcotics. That might be because pot's actually a very effective painkiller and it's not addictive and you can't kill yourself. Number two, you're seeing entrepreneurs popping up all over the place. They're starting businesses. Number three, alcohol deaths are going down. So you've got the drug industry that sells narcotics, that sells the OxyContin kind of products, and you got the alcohol industry, who both feel threatened by legalized pot. So the politicians weren't going to do it. It took the people. But when the people passed this law saying that we're going to legalize recreational pot in Washington State, They did not address the already existing 2-decade-old medical marijuana marketplace in Washington state. Now, similarly, in Washington state, medical marijuana had been decriminalized, but it never was regulated. So basically, in Washington state, what happened was, if your doctor wrote a prescription saying that you needed medical marijuana, you could still be arrested in Washington state for having medical marijuana or transporting it or using it. But most courts would accept your doctor's prescription and not prosecute you. Not all, but most. So what happened was people set up these little growing cooperatives to make medical marijuana for each other. Medical marijuana patients were growing it because they could with their prescription. And they were sharing it with other patients, some who couldn't grow it because they were so disabled or so injured or they were dying. And so these co-ops were put together. So now that recreational pot is legal and it's heavily regulated and it's generating a lot of tax money, Washington state is saying, we really need to do something about the medical marijuana market in this state as well. Because people who are users of medical marijuana, they would like to be able to walk into a dispensary and know that what they're buying is what they're buying. And not just, necessarily rely on their neighbor who's growing it. So there's two dueling pieces of legislation before the Senate of the state of Washington. One by a Republican and one by a Democrat. The one by a Republican is by a Republican who has been taking contributions from, and her entire party has been taking contributions from a multimillionaire in Washington state